The rain fell in steady sheets against my apartment window, creating rivulets that distorted the glow of streetlights outside. I pulled my threadbare cardigan tighter, watching my breath form faint clouds in the chill of my living room. The heating was out again, but I couldn't afford another emergency repair this month, not with the twins' birthday coming up. "Mommy?" Emma's tiny voice pulled me from my thoughts. She stood in the hallway, clutching her stuffed elephant, dark curls framing her face, his face in miniature. My heart squeezed painfully. "Lucas won't share the blanket. I'll be right there, sweetheart," I whispered, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Her skin was warm, too warm. Another fever brewing, another day of missed work looming ahead of me. 5 years. 5 years of scraping by on waitressing tips and overnight shifts at the hospital cafeteria. 5 years of jumping at shadows and changing apartments every time I thought I saw one of his men. 5 years of raising his children alone, keeping them safe from the darkness that had nearly consumed me. I tucked the twins back into bed, smoothing Lucas's hair away from his forehead. His eyes fluttered open briefly, those eyes, impossibly dark, like polished obsidian. Alessandro's eyes. I swallowed hard and began to sing softly until both children drifted back to sleep. My phone vibrated against the nightstand. Nora, my manager at the diner. Another early shift? I needed the money, but the twins. "Ellie, I need you to cover tomorrow morning. Jenna's out with the flu." Nora's voice was apologetic but firm. I closed my eyes, calculating childcare costs against the extra pay. "I'll be there," I said, hanging up before she could hear the exhaustion in my voice. Sleep came in restless waves, memories washing over me like the tide. The first time I saw him, standing in the doorway of that exclusive Manhattan restaurant where I worked as a hostess. The way the room seemed to dim around his presence, as if he bent the very light to his will. The custom-tailored suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. The silent nod of the men who flanked him, who swept the room with vigilant eyes before he would take a single step inside. Alessandro Venucci. I didn't know then what that name meant. I didn't understand the power he wielded, the empire he controlled from shadows. I only knew that when those dark eyes landed on me, something inside me recognized a predator. "Table for two," he'd said, voice like velvet wrapped around steel, somewhere private. I remember the way my hands trembled as I led him through the restaurant, feeling his gaze burning into my back, the weight of it, assessing, considering. I'd spilled water on his companion's sleeve in my nervousness, mortified as the cold liquid splashed across expensive silk. "I'm so sorry. I'll get—" "Leave it." His voice had cut through my panicked apologies. Then, inexplicably, the corner of his mouth had lifted slightly. "What's your name?" "Eleanor," I'd whispered, clutching my notepad like a shield. "Eleanor Wright." The next night, he returned. Alone, asked for me specifically. Left a $1,000 tip and a business card with a single line written on the back. "Tomorrow, 8 p.m. I should have thrown it away. Should have called in sick the next day and the day after that. Should have run as far and as fast as my legs could carry me. Instead, I'd found myself standing before the mirror, wearing the only nice dress I owned, heart hammering in my chest as I waited for the car he'd sent. The rain was falling harder now, mimicking the thundering of my heart, as I pulled myself from the memory. 5 years hadn't dulled the ache, the bone-deep longing that still haunted me when I allowed myself to remember. Morning came too soon. I dropped the twins at Mrs. Patel's apartment downstairs, promising to bring back cookies from the diner as I kissed their cheeks. They were used to this routine, these early goodbyes, but it never got easier watching their small faces press against the window as I walked away. The diner was already busy when I arrived, the breakfast rush in full swing. I tied my apron with practiced movements, sliding into the rhythm of orders and coffee refills. "Table 6 needs menus," Jody called, as she bustled past with a tray of pancakes. I grabbed the laminated cards, plastering on my customer service smile as I approached the booth. "Good morning. Welcome to..." The menu slipped from my fingers, clattering against the linoleum floor. Marco sat at the table, his square face instantly recognizable despite the 5 years that had passed. Alessandro's most trusted lieutenant, his right hand. The man who had taught me how to shoot a gun, just in case, during those months I'd lived in Alessandro's world. Our eyes locked, and I watched recognition bloom across his features, followed quickly by shock, then something like triumph. "Eleanor," he said, voice low but carrying enough that several nearby customers glanced up. Well, the boss will be very interested to know where you've been hiding." My lungs constricted, the air suddenly too thick to breathe. "Marco, please," I whispered, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Whatever you think you know. 5 years," he cut me off, leaning forward. 5 years we've been looking for you. You disappeared without a trace. He never stopped, you know, never gave up. And now here you are, serving eggs and coffee." His eyes narrowed. "In a town less than 3 hours from New York. Were you ever planning to tell him?" "Tell him what?" I managed, though I already knew. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst through my ribs. "About his children." The words fell like stones between us. "Oh yes, Eleanor. We know. How old are they now? 4? 5? His smile was sharp, predatory. "Dark hair, I bet." His eyes. The room tilted dangerously. "How did you find me?" The question was barely audible, even to my own ears. Marco tapped his phone. "Facial recognition software. We've been running your picture through every database for years. Someone uploaded a photo from a local school fundraiser last week. You were in the background, serving cookies." He shrugged. "Technology, eh? Wonderful thing." I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. "Marco, you don't understand. He can't what? Know about his own blood? His legacy?" Marco's voice hardened. "You think he wouldn't want to know he has children? That you've kept them from him all this time?" "Those children are all I have," I whispered fiercely. "They're innocent. They don't belong in his world. They're Venucci's," Marco said simply, as if that explained everything. And to him, it did. In Alessandro's world, family was everything. Blood was sacred. Loyalty, absolute. "The boss will be here tonight." The words hit me like physical blows. Tonight. Alessandro would be here tonight. "I need to go," I said, already backing away. "My shift." "Don't run, Eleanor." Marco's voice dropped lower, a warning in every syllable. "Not again. There's a man watching your apartment building right now. Another one at your children's preschool. You understand?" Terror clawed up my throat, raw and primal. "If you hurt them..." "Nobody's going to hurt them." Marco looked genuinely surprised at the suggestion. "They're his blood. They're under his protection now, whether you like it or not." He slid from the booth, dropping cash on the table. 7 o'clock. Your apartment. Be there with the children." He brushed past me, pausing just long enough to murmur, "He never got over you, you know. Whatever you're thinking right now, whatever you're afraid of, it's worse for him. 5 years wondering if you were dead or alive, then he was gone." The bell above the diner door chiming cheerfully in his wake. I made it to the bathroom before the panic attack hit in full force, locking myself in a stall as the walls seemed to close in. My hands shook violently as I fumbled for my phone, dialing the only number I could think of. "Tasha. It's me. He found us. I need help." The rest of my shift passed in a blur of mechanical movements and scattered thoughts. I dropped a tray of glasses, burning my arm with hot coffee, barely feeling the pain. Nora sent me home early, concern etched on her weathered face. "You don't look well, honey. Go on home to those babies of yours." Home. The word echoed hollowly as I walked the 6 blocks to our apartment building. It had never been much, a 2-bedroom unit with peeling paint and temperamental plumbing, but it had been safe. Anonymous. Ours. Now it felt like a trap, the walls suddenly paper-thin, the locks flimsy and useless against the storm that was coming. Mrs. Patel looked up in surprise when I knocked. "Early today? The little ones are napping." I nodded, not trusting my voice, watching as my twin slept peacefully on her faded couch, unaware that their world was about to implode. Lucas had his thumb tucked against his palm, a habit he'd had since infancy. Emma's dark lashes fanned against her cheeks, her tiny hand curled around her brother's sleeve even in sleep. Always connected, these two. Always a unit. Just like their father and his brother had been, before Mateo's death had left Alessandro with a void nothing could fill. I gathered them into my arms, one by one, their warm weight both comfort and burden. Mrs. Patel helped me carry their backpacks, chattering about how well they'd eaten lunch, how Lucas had drawn a picture of a dog. "Everything okay, dear?" she asked, as I fumbled with my keys, noting my silence. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "A ghost?" Yes, that was it exactly. The ghost of a life I'd fled, coming back to claim what I'd stolen. "Just tired," I lied, managing a smile that felt brittle on my face. "Thank you for watching them." Inside, I moved on autopilot. Bath time, snacks, cartoons on our ancient television while I paced the apartment, checking windows, calculating impossible escapes. Tasha hadn't called back. My few emergency savings wouldn't get us far. Every shadow outside made my heart stutter. "Mommy, why are you sad?" Emma asked, climbing into my lap as I sat on the edge of the sofa. Her tiny hands framed my face, those dark eyes, his eyes, peering into mine with uncanny perception. "I'm not sad, baby," I lied, pulling her close. "Just thinking." "About what?" Lucas joined us, never one to be left out. "About your father," I thought. "About the man who doesn't know you exist. The man I ran from to keep you safe. The man who's coming tonight to take it all away." "About birthday cakes," I said instead. "What kind should we have this year?" Their excited chatter about frosting flavors and candle colors faded to background noise as I watched the sun begin its descent, shadows lengthening across our worn carpet. 6 o'clock. 1 hour left. At 6:30, I changed into the nicest outfit I owned. Black jeans, a blue sweater without pills or stains. I brushed the twins' hair, dressed them in matching outfits I'd been saving for a special occasion. If this was to be our last night as we were, I wanted them to look their best. I wanted him to see what he'd missed, what I'd protected all these years. At 6:45, I heard it, the distinctive purr of expensive engines outside our building. Car doors opening and closing with soft, expensive thuds, murmured voices, the heavy tread of security men taking positions. At 6:55, a knock at our door. "Mommy, someone's here," Lucas said, looking up from his toys. "I know, baby." My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Distant, calm, when inside I was shattering. "Remember what I told you? We're going to meet a friend of Mommy's tonight, someone very important." "Like a princess?" Emma asked, always hoping for magic. "A different kind of royalty," I thought grimly. "Just be polite, okay? Both of you." Another knock, more insistent this time. I took a deep breath, crossed to the door on legs that felt disconnected from my body, and opened it. And there he was. Alessandro Vannucci filled the doorway of my shabby apartment, taller and broader than I remembered. The years had only refined him, chiseling his aristocratic features into something even more devastating. His black hair was shorter now, silver threading the temples in a way that only enhanced his authority. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than 6 months of my rent. A heavy wool coat draped over his shoulders despite the mild spring evening. But it was his eyes that held me paralyzed. Those obsidian eyes I'd seen every day for 5 years reflected in my children's faces. Eyes that now moved from my face to the small figures behind me, widening imperceptibly as understanding dawned. "Eleanor," he said. My name in his mouth, still a caress and a claim all at once. Then his gaze locked on the twins again. Something raw and vulnerable flashing across his features before his expression settled into careful neutrality. "Won't you invite me in?" The silence stretched between us, taut as a wire. Behind Alessandro, I could see Marco and another security man I didn't recognize standing in the hallway, their expressions carefully blank. But it was Alessandro who commanded every particle of my attention, his presence filling the cramped entryway of my apartment like smoke, curling into every corner. "Of course," I finally managed, stepping back to allow him entry. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, too high, too brittle. He moved with the same controlled grace I remembered, each step deliberate. His gaze swept the apartment in one practiced assessment, taking in the water stain on the ceiling, the mismatched furniture, the basket of unfolded laundry I'd left on the coffee table. I saw my life through his eyes and felt heat rise to my cheeks. Then he looked at the twins, who had retreated to stand beside the couch, their small shoulders touching in the unconscious way they always sought connection with each other. Emma partially hidden behind her brother, Lucas standing slightly forward, chin raised in a gesture so achingly familiar it made my breath catch. These are... Alessandro's voice trailed off, the question hanging in the air between us. Emma and Lucas, I supplied, moving to stand beside my children, placing a protective hand on each of their shoulders. They're 4.5. His jaw tightened, a muscle working beneath the skin. I knew he was calculating, confirming what he already suspected. The twins had been born 8 months after I disappeared. Children, I said, voice steadier than I felt. This is Mr. Vannucci, an old friend of Mommy's. Lucas stepped forward, extending his small hand just as I'd taught him when meeting adults. Hello, Mr. Vannucci. I'm Lucas Wright. I'm 4.5. Alessandro looked at the offered hand for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Then, with careful deliberation, he crouched down to Lucas's level and took his hand. Hello, Lucas Wright, he said. And I could hear the subtle emphasis he placed on the surname, my surname, not his. It's very good to meet you. Your voice sounds different, Lucas observed, his head tilting to one side. Like the men in the movies, a ghost of a smile touched Alessandro's lips. I was born in Italy. That's why I sound different. Is that far away? Lucas asked. Yes, across the ocean. Emma, never able to resist her curiosity for long, edged out from behind her brother. Do you have a boat? She asked. To cross the ocean? Alessandro turned his attention to her, and I saw the impact of it like a physical force. Emma, with her delicate features and dark, solemn eyes, the mirror image of his mother from the photographs he'd once shown me. I have access to boats, he answered carefully, and planes. Have you ever been on an airplane, Emma? She shook her head, curls bouncing. Mommy says they're expensive. I winced at her innocent honesty. Alessandro's eyes flicked to mine, something dangerous flashing in their depths. Perhaps someday you will, he said, straightening to his full height. He turned to me. The children should get ready for bed now. You and I need to talk. It wasn't a request. I swallowed hard, fighting the instinct to challenge him in front of the twins. It's a school night, I agreed, forcing a smile. Bath time, you two. Then one story before bed. But Mommy... Lucas began to protest. No arguments tonight, I said, firmer than usual. Go pick out your pajamas. I'll be there in a minute. They went reluctantly, casting curious glances at our visitor as they disappeared down the short hallway to their bedroom. As soon as they were out of earshot, Alessandro closed the distance between us in 2 measured steps. 5 years, he said, his voice a low, controlled burn. 5 years, Eleanor. And not once did you think to tell me I had children? I lifted my chin, meeting his gaze despite the tremor that ran through me. I did what I had to do to protect them. Protect them? His laugh was short, humorless. From their father? From the security and comfort I could have provided? From their rightful inheritance? From your world, I countered, keeping my voice low but fierce. From the violence and the danger. From growing up surrounded by fear and death. His eyes narrowed. You know nothing about my world. I know enough. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the stuffiness of the apartment. I lived in it, remember? I saw what happened to Carlo when someone wanted to send you a message. I was there when they brought Matteo's body back. Pain flashed across his features at the mention of his brother's name. That has nothing to do with my children. It has everything to do with them. They are children, Alessandro. Innocent. They deserve a normal life, away from all of it. He stepped closer still, until I could smell the familiar scent of him. Expensive cologne underlaid with something darker, more primal. And you think this is a normal life? This apartment, those clothes, the way your hands are raw from whatever menial work you've been doing? His voice dropped even lower. You think I wouldn't have taken care of you all? That I wouldn't have protected you? That I wouldn't have given you everything? At what price? I whispered. What would you have demanded in return? Something shifted in his expression. a stillness coming over him that I remembered all too well. The calm before the storm. You think I would have held our children hostage to keep you? Is that how little you thought of me? Before I could answer, Emma called from the bathroom. Mommy, we need help with the water. I stepped back, breaking the tension between us. I need to take care of them. Alessandro nodded once, sharp. Go, but this conversation is far from over. I moved past him, painfully aware of his presence as I squeezed through the narrow hallway. The twins were already in the bathroom, Lucas struggling with the faucet while Emma arranged their bath toys along the edge of the tub. Is Mr. Vannucci staying for dinner? Lucas asked as I adjusted the water temperature. No, sweetheart. He just came to talk to Mommy. Is he your boyfriend? Emma's question was innocent, but it struck like a physical blow. No, I said quickly. He's just someone I knew a long time ago. He looks scary, Lucas observed, lifting his arm so I could help him with his shirt. But not mean scary, just important scary, out of the mouths of babes. He is important, I said carefully. But you don't need to be scared of him. I helped them into the tub, going through the motions of bath time with mechanical precision while my mind raced. Alessandro was here, in my apartment. Alessandro knew about the twins. Everything I'd built over 5 years of struggle and sacrifice was crumbling around me. Mommy, you're washing my hair too hard, Emma complained, pulling me back to the present. I'm sorry, baby. I gentled my touch, rinsing the suds from her dark curls. Mommy's just a little distracted tonight. After bath time came pajamas, teeth brushing, and the ritual of selecting a bedtime story. I was acutely aware of Alessandro's presence in the living room, just beyond the thin walls. Could he hear us? Was he listening to these private moments, these rituals that had been ours alone for so long? This one, Lucas decided, pulling out a worn copy of Where the Wild Things Are. I sat between their beds, the book open on my lap, aware that my voice was shakier than usual as I read the familiar words. The twins didn't seem to notice, their eyelids growing heavy by the final page. Sweet dreams, my loves, I whispered, kissing each forehead. I'll see you in the morning. A lie, perhaps. I had no idea what the coming hours would bring, what Alessandro intended to do now that he'd found us. The thought of separation from my children sent a wave of physical pain through my chest. I love you to the moon and back, Emma murmured. Our nightly ritual. And to the stars and beyond, I finished, tucking her stuffed elephant beside her. I left their nightlight on, drawing their door partially closed before walking back to face Alessandro. The short hallway seemed endless, each step carrying me toward a confrontation I'd feared for 5 long years. He was standing by the window when I returned, looking out at the street below, hands clasped behind his back. The posture was so familiar, it made my chest ache with memories. Alessandro at the windows of his Manhattan penthouse, surveying the city like a king overlooking his domain. They're asleep? He asked without turning. Almost. I remained near the hallway, maintaining distance between us. Alessandro, what do you want? Now he turned, his dark gaze pinning me in place. What do I want? He repeated, voice dangerously soft. I want the 5 years that were stolen from me. I want to understand how the woman I trusted above all others could disappear in the night, carrying my children, without a word. I want to know why you thought running was preferable to coming to me, talking to me. You know why, I said, the words scraping my throat. After what happened to Matteo, do not speak of my brother, he cut me off, voice sharp as a blade. I have to, I insisted, because that's why I left. I saw what his death did to you, how it changed you. Alessandro was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was controlled, measured. The night Matteo died, you made me a promise. Do you remember? I closed my eyes briefly, the memory washing over me. Alessandro, broken in a way I'd never seen before, his grief raw and terrible. Myself, holding him as he shattered, whispering promises in the dark. I said I'd never leave you, I admitted softly, that you wouldn't have to face it alone, and yet 3 weeks later you were gone. The betrayal in his voice was still fresh, undimmed by time. No note, no explanation, just gone, as if you'd never existed. I found out I was pregnant, I said, the words falling between us like stones. And that same day, I overheard you giving orders to find the people responsible for Matteo, to make examples of them, to ensure that no one would ever touch a Venucci again without paying with their lives. I lifted my chin. You were planning a war, Alessandro. And I couldn't bring children into that world. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. So instead, you brought them into this one, a world of struggle and want. A world without protection. A world without their father. A world without blood on their hands. I countered, without targets on their backs. Alessandro moved then, crossing the room with fluid grace until he stood before me. And now that they're here, flesh and blood. Not theoretical children you were trying to save from an imagined fate. Now that they're wearing secondhand clothes and living in an apartment where the heat doesn't work properly. Now that they're asking for things you can't give them. Are you still so certain you made the right choice? His words struck nerves, exposed insecurities I'd battled every day since the twins were born. The things I couldn't provide, the opportunities they would never have, the constant grinding anxiety of living paycheck to paycheck. They're happy, I said, but my voice wavered. They're loved. They could have been happy, loved, and secure, he replied, each word precise. They could have had the best of everything. Instead, you've been working yourself to exhaustion to provide the bare minimum. I looked away, unable to hold his gaze. It wasn't just about them, I admitted. It was about me too, about what loving you was doing to me. Explain. The command was soft, but unyielding. I was losing myself, I said. Becoming someone I didn't recognize. Someone who looked the other way when certain business associates came to dinner. Someone who pretended not to see the guns your men carried. Someone who rationalized and excused and ignored because I loved you too much to see clearly. Alessandro was silent for a long moment. Then, with careful deliberation, he reached out and touched my cheek, turning my face back toward his. His fingers were warm against my skin, the contact sending electricity sparking through my veins. And yet you named our son Lucas, he said softly. After my father. The observation caught me off guard. I'd never told anyone the real reason behind my son's name. It had been a moment of weakness, a small concession to the connection I couldn't fully sever. I thought they should have something of you, I whispered, even if they never knew you. Something shifted in his expression, the hard lines softening almost imperceptibly. You could have disappeared completely, changed your name, gone to the other side of the country. Yet you stayed close enough that Marco found you by accident. Part of you wanted to be found, Eleanor. No. I shook my head, stepping back from his touch. That's not true. Isn't it? He followed, refusing to let me retreat. 5 years. And you've never been with anyone else, never even tried to replace me in their lives with another father figure. How would you know that? I demanded, heat rising to my cheeks. Because I know you, he replied simply, and because I had Marco do a thorough background check the moment he recognized you. You work 2 jobs. You have no romantic entanglements. Your only friend appears to be this Tasha person you called in panic today. His mouth curved slightly. By the way, she won't be returning your call. Her phone service has been temporarily interrupted. Fear sliced through me. What did you do to her? Nothing. He seemed almost offended by the suggestion. My men simply ensured she wouldn't interfere until we've resolved our situation. She's perfectly safe, I assure you. Our situation, I repeated. Is that what this is? A situation to be resolved? This, Alessandro gestured between us, is a family torn apart by misunderstanding and fear. And yes, I intend to resolve it. How? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. By forcing us to go back with you, by taking my children? His expression darkened. Our children, Eleanor, and I would never take them from their mother. What kind of monster do you think I am? I don't know anymore, I admitted. The Alessandro I knew wouldn't have threatened my friend. The Alessandro you knew died the night you disappeared, he said, voice hard-edged. I tore the city apart looking for you. I thought you were dead, Eleanor. For weeks, I thought someone had taken you, killed you, to get to me. His voice dropped lower. Do you have any idea what that did to me? What it's been like? Wondering if you were even alive all this time? Guilt twisted in my stomach. In my desperation to protect my unborn children, I'd never fully considered what my disappearance would do to him, how it would look from his perspective. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't see another way." "There's always another way," he replied. "If you'd talked to me, if you'd trusted me." "Could I have?" I challenged. "If I'd told you I was pregnant but wanted the children raised away from your world, would you have let us go?" The silence that followed was answer enough. Alessandro had never been a man who let go of what he considered his. "What happens now?" I asked, wrapping my arms around myself. "Now," he said, "we come to an arrangement, one that serves the best interests of Lucas and Emma, which are to know their father, to have the security and opportunities I can provide, to be acknowledged as Venucci's." I shook my head. "They're too young to understand any of this. It would only confuse them." "Children are remarkably adaptable," he countered, "and I've already lost 5 years. I won't lose another day." Outside, rain had begun to fall again, pattering against the window in a steady rhythm. The sound had always soothed the twins as infants. Now it felt like a countdown, marking the moments until my carefully constructed life shattered completely. "What kind of arrangement?" I finally asked, voice barely audible over the rain. Alessandro's eyes never left mine. "You and the children will move to my estate in Connecticut. It's secure, private, with extensive grounds for them to play. They will continue their education with private tutors. You will want for nothing. And in exchange," I pressed, knowing there would be conditions. "In exchange, you will allow me to be their father, to provide for them as I should have been doing all along, to protect them as is my right and responsibility." His gaze intensified. "And you will never run from me again." The last words hung between us, heavy with unspoken meaning. This wasn't just about the twins. It had never been just about the twins. "I can't just uproot them overnight," I said, seeking practical objections to mask the turmoil inside me. "They have school, friends, routines, all of which can be replicated and improved upon." He cut in smoothly. "As for timing, I'm prepared to be reasonable. 1 week. Time enough to settle your affairs here and prepare the children for the transition." 1 week, I echoed, the time frame impossibly short. "And if I refuse?" Alessandro's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted, the predator beneath the civilized veneer becoming more apparent. "You won't," he said with quiet certainty, "because you know, deep down, that this is what's best for them. For all of us. You can't just walk back into our lives and take control," I protested, even as I felt the ground shifting beneath my feet. "I'm not taking control, Eleanor. I'm taking responsibility." He stepped closer, his presence engulfing me. "I'm giving our children the life they deserve. The life you deserve. I don't need your charity," I said, the words sounding hollow even to my own ears. "This isn't charity." For the first time, genuine anger flashed in his eyes. "This is family. This is duty. This is righting a wrong that never should have happened." A small noise from the hallway made us both turn. Lucas stood in the doorway in his dinosaur pajamas, rubbing one eye sleepily. "Mommy?" he said, voice thick with interrupted sleep. I heard loud talking. Alessandro went absolutely still, his gaze fixed on our son with an intensity that made my heart clench. I moved quickly to Lucas, crouching down to his level. "I'm sorry we woke you, baby," I said softly. "Mr. Venucci and I were just having a grown-up conversation." Lucas looked past me to Alessandro, studying him with uncharacteristic solemnity. "Are you mad at my mommy?" he asked directly. Alessandro's expression softened in a way I'd only seen a handful of times before, when he spoke of his mother, or the rare occasions he'd let his guard down completely with me. He moved forward slowly, as if approaching a skittish animal, and knelt to Lucas's eye level beside me. "No, Lucas, I'm not mad at your mother," he said, his voice gentle in a way that made my chest ache. "Sometimes grown-ups have passionate discussions about important things, but that doesn't mean we're angry with each other. Lucas seemed to consider this, his small face serious. My friend Zach's dad gets loud when he's mad. Then his mom cries. Then his dad leaves. The simple observation hung in the air between us, a child's unfiltered perception of adult conflict. I saw Alessandro process this, saw the calculation behind his eyes as he formulated his response. That won't happen here, he assured Lucas. I promise you that. Pinky promise? Lucas extended his small finger, the ultimate binding contract in his 4-year-old world. Without hesitation, Alessandro linked his much larger pinky with our son's. Pinky promise. The gesture was so unexpected, so incongruous with the powerful man I knew, that I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. I blinked them away hastily. Back to bed now, mister, I said, smoothing Lucas's hair. It's late. Can Mr. Vannucci tuck me in too? Lucas asked, the request catching me completely off guard. He does the grown-up voice better than you do for the wild things. Alessandro's eyes met mine over our son's head, seeking permission. I hesitated, then nodded once, sharply. This was happening, whether I was ready or not. My children were forming connections with their father, invisible threads spinning between them that could never be broken. I led the way back to their bedroom, hyper-aware of Alessandro behind me, of his size and presence filling our narrow hallway. Emma was still asleep, her dark curls splayed across her pillow, one small hand curled beneath her chin. The sight of her, so vulnerable, so trusting, made my protective instincts flare. Lucas climbed into his bed, arranging his stuffed triceratops just so. The page with the wild rumpus, he directed. All business now that he had a new audience. Alessandro looked to me and I handed him the book, opened to the right page. He cleared his throat softly, then began to read. His rich voice filled the small bedroom, giving weight and drama to the familiar words. Lucas watched him, utterly captivated, as if seeing the story come alive in a whole new way. When he finished, Lucas was already drifting, eyes heavy. Night, Mommy. Night, Mr. Vannucci, he mumbled. Good night, Lucas, Alessandro said, and I could hear the emotion he was working to control. Sleep well. I leaned down to kiss Lucas's forehead, then moved to Emma's bed, tucking her blanket more securely around her shoulders and brushing a curl from her cheek. When I turned, Alessandro was watching Emma with a look of such raw longing that I had to look away. We retreated silently to the living room. As soon as we were out of earshot, Alessandro spoke. They're beautiful, Eleanor, he said quietly. Perfect. They are, I agreed, unable to deny him this acknowledgement at least. He has my father's forehead, he observed. And Emma. She looks just like my mother. I know, I admitted. I've seen the photographs you showed me. Alessandro moved to the small side table where I kept the few family photos I had, mostly the twins at various stages, a couple with Tasha, one with Mrs. Patel from last Christmas. He picked up a frame containing a close-up of the twins on their 4th birthday, chocolate cake smeared on their grinning faces. 4 years, he said, more to himself than to me. 4 birthdays, first words, first steps. All of it, gone. Alessandro, I missed everything. He cut me off, his voice tight with controlled emotion. Their birth, their first smile, their first word, the first time they walked. Guilt twisted in my stomach, sharp and insistent. Lucas's first word was no, I said softly. Emma's was book. They both walked at 13 months within days of each other. Lucas fell and got a split lip. Emma was more cautious, always holding on to furniture. He looked at me, eyes dark with something between gratitude and pain. Tell me more. And so I did. We sat on my threadbare couch, and I filled in the gaps of the past 5 years. The twins' early days, their personalities as they emerged, their little triumphs and struggles. Alessandro listened with fierce concentration, as if committing every detail to memory, occasionally asking questions that revealed how hungry he was for this knowledge. They've never been sick? Seriously ill? He asked after I'd told him about their preschool adventures. Lucas had pneumonia when he was 2, I admitted. We spent 3 nights in the hospital. It was terrifying. His expression darkened. You were alone. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. Tasha helped when she could, but yes, mostly alone. That ends now, he said with quiet finality. You will never face such things alone again. The declaration hung between us, both promise and warning. I shifted uncomfortably under his intense gaze. It's late, I said, changing the subject. And I have work tomorrow. Both jobs. Call them, Alessandro said. Tell them you won't be coming in. I can't just... You can, and you will. His tone brooked no argument. Things have changed, Eleanor. Your life as you've known it for 5 years is over. The sooner you accept that, the easier this transition will be for everyone, especially the twins. Anger flashed through me. You can't just snap your fingers and expect me to fall in line. These are my children. Our children, he corrected, voice hardening. And while I'm willing to be patient about certain aspects of this situation, my patience has limits. You kept them from me for 5 years. That debt will be repaid. They're not collateral, I snapped. Not bargaining chips in whatever game you think we're playing. This is no game, Alessandro said, standing abruptly. This is our family, my legacy, my blood. I've allowed you space tonight, out of respect for what you've done raising them alone. But make no mistake, Eleanor, I will be part of their lives from this moment forward. The only question is whether you make this easy or difficult. The threat was implicit, but clear. I stared up at him, at the man I'd once loved beyond reason, now a stranger with familiar eyes. What do you want from me? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. I want you to pack what matters, he replied. Tomorrow morning we begin the transition. My security team will accompany you to handle your notice at work. By evening, arrangements will be made to break your lease. The day after, we begin introducing the children to the idea of their new home. They'll be confused, upset. Children adapt, especially to improved circumstances. And me? I challenged. What happens to me in this grand plan of yours? Something flickered in his eyes, a heat I remembered all too well. You will be where you belong, with your children, with me. I don't belong to you, Alessandro, I said, rising to face him. I never did. No? He stepped closer, closing the distance between us until I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Then why did you never replace the rings? My hand automatically went to my throat, where 2 gold rings hung on a chain beneath my sweater, the engagement ring he'd given me, with its obscenely large diamond and the simple gold band that had been his mother's. I'd never been able to bring myself to sell them, even in my most desperate moments. Sentiment, I lied, nothing more. His lips curved slightly. Lie to yourself if you must, Eleanor, but never to me. His hand came up to cut my cheek, the touch sending electricity coursing through me. Your body remembers, even if your mind resists. I jerked away, heart hammering in my chest. Don't. 5 years hasn't changed what's between us, he continued, undeterred. I see it in your eyes, feel it in the way you respond to my touch. What's between us is history, I countered. And 2 children who deserve better than to be pawns in whatever game of possession you're playing. His expression hardened. Is that what you think this is? A game of possession? Isn't it? I challenged. You've never been able to accept losing anything that you consider yours. And you've never been able to accept that some bonds can't be broken, he returned. Not by time, not by distance, not even by betrayal. Before I could respond, a phone chimed. Alessandro reached into his jacket, checked the screen, and frowned slightly. Marco has identified surveillance on the building, he said. All business now. Not my men. Someone else is watching you. Cold fear washed through me. What? Who? Unknown. But this changes things. He typed a rapid response, then looked at me. Pack bags for yourself and the children. Essentials only. We're leaving tonight. Tonight? I echoed, stunned. But you said a week. That was before I knew you were being watched. His voice was clipped, professional. The safety of my family comes first, always, but the children are asleep. They'll be confused, frightened. They'll be safe. He cut me off, which is more than I can guarantee if we stay here. He moved toward the window, peering through the blinds with practiced caution. How long have you lived in this building? 3 years, I answered automatically. And in this city? The same. We moved here when the twins were just over a year old. Alessandro's jaw tightened. 3 years in one location. Too long. Too predictable. He turned to me, his expression grave. This isn't just about us anymore, Eleanor. If someone is watching you, it's because of me. Because somehow, they've made the connection. The implication sent ice through my veins. The children are a vulnerability, he finished for me. My vulnerability, and potentially valuable to my enemies. This is exactly why I left, I whispered fiercely. This danger, this life where people become targets, and yet here we are, he returned. The danger found you anyway. The difference is that now you have me to protect you. All of you. Another text chimed on his phone. He read it quickly, then issued rapid instructions in Italian, a language I'd learned enough of during our time together to understand the gist. Security perimeter, extraction plan, safe house protocols. Who's watching us? I asked, moving to the twins' bedroom door as if I could shield them with my body alone. I don't know yet, Alessandro admitted, and I could see the calculation behind his eyes, the mental catalog of enemies and threats. But I intend to find out. He crossed to me in 3 quick strides, taking my shoulders in his hands. Eleanor, listen to me carefully. We don't have time for arguments or negotiations. You need to pack now. Clothes for 3 days. Important documents. Anything the children can't live without. We leave in 20 minutes. The urgency in his voice, the steel in his eyes, broke through my resistance. I nodded once and moved to the small closet in the hallway where I kept our emergency bag. A habit formed during those first terrified months after leaving him, when I'd been certain he would find us at any moment. I keep passports and birth certificates in here, I said, pulling out the duffel bag. And a change of clothes for each of us. Alessandro's eyebrow raised slightly. You've maintained an escape plan all this time. Old habits, I said, not meeting his gaze. Indeed, something like approval flashed across his features. Get what else you need. I'll arrange transport. While Alessandro spoke quietly into his phone, I moved through our small apartment gathering essentials. Emma's elephant, without which she wouldn't sleep. Lucas's dinosaur nightlight. The photo album containing the only pictures I had of them as newborns, medications from the bathroom cabinet. My movements were mechanical, driven by the same instinct for survival that had propelled me through the past 5 years. When I returned to the living room, Alessandro was standing by the window again, posture alert. My men have identified a vehicle across the street. 2 occupants. They've been there at least 3 hours. How do you know they're watching us specifically? The driver has binoculars. They're focused on this window. His voice was matter of fact. Marco is moving into position now. Once we have a clear extraction route, we move. The clinical precision of his planning should have terrified me. Instead, I felt a traitorous sense of security. Whatever else Alessandro was, criminal, ruthless, dangerous, he was also capable, protected. The kind of man who anticipated threats before they materialized. What about the children? I asked. We can't just carry them out half asleep. They'll be terrified. Alessandro considered this. Wake them gently. Tell them we're going on an adventure. A surprise trip. In the middle of the night? Children love surprises, he said with certainty. And midnight adventures. Despite everything, I almost smiled at his confident assumption. You have a lot to learn about 4-year-olds. I intend to, he replied. And the simple declaration held more weight than any elaborate promise could have. I moved back to the twins' room, heart heavy. This was happening too fast, spinning out of my control like a car on ice. I gently shook Emma awake first, knowing she would be the harder one to manage if startled. Emma, sweetheart, I whispered. Wake up, baby. She stirred, dark eyes blinking open in confusion. Mommy? Is it morning? No, honey. But we're going on a special trip, an adventure. I stroked her curls back from her forehead. We need to get up and get dressed now. Now? She repeated, bewildered. But it's dark. That's what makes it special, I improvised. A nighttime adventure. Lucas was already stirring, roused by our voices. What's happening? He asked, immediately more alert than his sister. We're going on a trip, I explained, helping Emma sit up. With Mr. Vannucci. It's a surprise. Lucas's eyes widened. Like a vacation? Something like that, I hedged, pulling out the clothes I'd laid aside for them. Let's get dressed quickly and quietly, like ninjas. Can you do that? The mention of ninjas, as I'd known it would, captured Lucas's imagination. He nodded solemnly and began changing into his clothes with focused determination. Emma was slower, still heavy with sleep, but compliant. As I helped them dress, Alessandro appeared in the doorway, watching silently. I could feel his gaze on us, drinking in this mundane parental moment as if it were precious beyond measure, which I realized, to him, it was. All set? He asked when the twins were dressed, their small backpacks filled with a few toys and books. Almost, I answered, zipping Emma's jacket. We just need shoes. Alessandro nodded, then addressed the children directly. Lucas, Emma, we're going to play a special game. When we go outside, you need to stay very quiet and hold your mother's hand tightly. Can you do that? They nodded, eyes wide, caught up in the adventure despite their lingering sleepiness. Good. He knelt before them, his expression serious but gentle. I promise you're going to like where we're going. There's a big house with room to play, and a garden, and maybe even a puppy someday. But first, we have to be very brave and very quiet, like spies. Can you be brave for me? I'm the bravest, Lucas declared, puffing out his small chest. Me too, Emma echoed, not to be outdone. Alessandro smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his severe features. I know you are, just like your mother. His eyes met mine over their heads, a moment of understanding passing between us. Whatever our past, whatever conflict lay between us, in this moment we were united in purpose, protecting our children. His phone buzzed again. Time to move, he said after checking it. Marco has secured the route. How are we getting out? I asked, helping the twins with their shoes. Service entrance at the back of the building. Cars are waiting. I nodded, gathering our bags. Alessandro surprised me by taking them from my hands, leaving me free to guide the children. Another text arrived on his phone, and his expression darkened. What is it? I asked. The watchers are moving, he said, voice low so the twins wouldn't hear. We need to go, now. I gathered Emma into my arms while Lucas clung to my hand. Alessandro moved ahead of us, checking the hallway before gesturing us forward. We moved silently through the apartment building, taking the back stairs rather than the elevator. The twins, caught up in this spy game, remained quiet, though Emma buried her face in my neck, sensing the tension despite our efforts to shield them. At the service entrance, Marco waited, along with two other men I didn't recognize. Their expressions were grim, professional, hands hovering near concealed weapons. Alessandro issued rapid instructions in Italian, then turned to me. When we move quickly. I'll take Lucas. You keep hold of Emma. Straight to the second car. Don't stop. Don't look back. I nodded, tightening my grip on Emma. Alessandro lifted Lucas into his arms, my son's small body dwarfed by his father's broad frame. Lucas didn't protest. Instead, he wrapped his arms around Alessandro's neck with the instant trust that only children can offer. Ready? Alessandro asked, hand on the door. Yes, I whispered, though every fiber of my being screamed in protest at this sudden upheaval. Alessandro pushed the door open, and we moved into the night. Rain still fell, soaking us immediately as we crossed the short distance to the waiting cars. I kept my head down, focusing only on reaching the vehicle, on keeping Emma safe against me. Suddenly, Marco's voice cut through the night. Down! Alessandro reacted instantly, dropping into a crouch, shielding Lucas with his body. I froze for a split second before instinct kicked in, and I turned, putting myself between Emma and whatever threat had triggered the warning. The crack of gunfire split the night, impossibly loud in the quiet street. Emma screamed against my shoulder, and Lucas cried out in fear. I felt Alessandro's hand on my back, pushing me forward, toward the car whose door now stood open. Get in, he commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. I dove into the vehicle, still clutching Emma. Alessandro followed with Lucas, pushing us across the seat as Marco leapt into the front beside the driver. The door slammed, and the car accelerated with a squeal of tires. Are you hit? Alessandro's voice was urgent as he checked Lucas, then looked to me and Emma. "Is anyone hurt?" "No," I gasped, my heart threatening to pound out of my chest. "We're okay. We're okay." Emma was sobbing, her small body trembling violently against mine. Lucas had gone rigid in Alessandro's arms, his eyes wide with shock. "Shh, it's okay," I soothed, rocking Emma. "We're safe now. It's okay." "What just happened?" Lucas asked, his voice small and frightened. "Why were there loud bangs?" Alessandro and I exchanged glances over the children's heads. How to explain gunfire to a 4-year-old? "Car backfiring," Alessandro lied smoothly. "Nothing to worry about. You were very brave, just like I knew you would be." The car sped through the rainy streets, taking turns seemingly at random. In the front seat, Marco spoke urgently into a phone, coordinating with other vehicles in our convoy. "Were they after us specifically?" I asked Alessandro, voice low. His expression was grave. "Yes, that was no random attack." "Who?" "I don't know yet," he admitted, "but I will find out. And when I do..." He left the threat unspoken, but I could see the cold fury building behind his eyes. "The children," I reminded him, glancing meaningfully at the twins. "They're frightened." Alessandro visibly reined in his anger, focusing instead on Lucas, who still clung to him. "It's all right now," he assured our son. "We're going somewhere safe, somewhere no one can find us." "Like hiding?" Lucas asked. "Like a fortress," Alessandro corrected. "A place where I can protect you, all of you." Emma had quieted against my shoulder, her sobs reducing to hiccuping breaths. "I want to go home," she whispered. "We're going to a new home," I told her, stroking her hair. "A better one." The words felt strange on my tongue, an echo of the promises Alessandro had made earlier. But in this moment, with the reality of danger still pulsing through my veins, his world of security and protection no longer seemed like the greater threat. "Where are we going?" I asked Alessandro. "Not Connecticut," he replied grimly. "That location may be compromised if someone knows to watch you. We're heading to a property upstate, more isolated, more secure." I nodded, too shaken to argue. The adrenaline that had carried me through our escape was fading, leaving me hollow and exhausted. I leaned my head back against the seat, still holding Emma tightly against me. "Sleep if you can," Alessandro said, noticing my exhaustion. "It's a long drive." "I can't," I murmured. "Not after... that." His free hand found mine in the darkness of the car, fingers intertwining with mine as they had countless times before. "I won't let anything happen to any of you," he said, voice low and fierce. "I swear it on my life. Despite everything, the years of separation, the bitter words exchanged tonight, the gunfire still ringing in my ears, I believed him. Alessandro Vannucci was many things, but he protected what was his, and for better or worse, we were his now. As the car sped through the night, carrying us away from the life I'd built and toward an uncertain future, I found myself clinging to his hand like a lifeline. The twins gradually relaxed, lulled by the motion of the vehicle and the soft Italian lullaby. Alessandro began to hum, the same one his mother had sung to him, he'd once told me. We were running again. But this time, I wasn't running from Alessandro. I was running with him. Dawn was breaking when the car finally slowed, turning onto a narrow road flanked by dense forest. The twins had fallen asleep hours ago, Lucas's head resting against Alessandro's chest. Emma curled in my lap. I had dozed intermittently, jerking awake at every bump in the road, every slight change in direction. Alessandro remained alert throughout the journey, alternating between hushed conversations in Italian with Marco and watching over the sleeping children with an expression I couldn't fully decipher, something between wonder and fierce protectiveness. "We're almost there," he said quietly as the car began to climb a winding hill. "You should see it any moment now." As we crested the hill, the trees parted to reveal a sprawling stone mansion set against the backdrop of mountains just beginning to catch the first light of day. Unlike Alessandro's sleek modern penthouse in Manhattan, this place looked like it had been transplanted from the Italian countryside. Old-world elegance with ivy-covered walls and a circular driveway centered around an ornate fountain. "What is this place?" I asked, voice rough from exhaustion. "My grandfather's house," Alessandro replied. "He built it when he first came to America, wanting a piece of Tuscany in the New World. It's been in the family for 3 generations." The car pulled up to the massive front doors, where several men in dark suits were already waiting. Security, I realized. Alessandro's protective perimeter already established. "We'll take the children inside first," Alessandro said as the car stopped. "Get them settled before they fully wake. The transition will be easier that way." I nodded, too exhausted to argue. Alessandro carefully extracted himself from Lucas, passing our sleeping son to me as he exited the vehicle. Then he reached back in, gathering both children in his arms with surprising gentleness. "I've got them," he assured me. "You look dead on your feet." I couldn't deny it. The night's events had drained what little reserves I had left. I followed Alessandro up the wide stone steps, past the waiting security men, who nodded respectfully but kept their vigilant posture. Inside, the mansion was even more impressive. Soaring ceilings, marble floors, antique furniture that looked both priceless and well-used. But unlike the sterile luxury of many wealthy homes, this place had a lived-in quality, a warmth that surprised me. "The family wing is this way," Alessandro said, already heading up a curved staircase. "I had the staff prepare rooms for all of you, adjacent to the master suite." Staff. Of course there would be staff. We followed a long hallway lined with oil paintings. Ancestors, I presumed, until Alessandro stopped at a door midway down the corridor. "This will be the twins' room," he said, pushing the door open with his shoulder. I gasped despite myself. The room was a child's paradise, spacious and bright even in the early morning light, with twin beds draped in colorful linens, shelves of toys and books, a play area with a child-sized table and chairs, and even a reading nook built into a window seat. "How did you—" I began, then stopped. "You couldn't have known you'd find us yesterday. This room wasn't prepared for them specifically." Alessandro laid the twins gently on their beds, Emma on one with a purple comforter, Lucas on one with blue. They stirred but didn't wake, exhaustion keeping them under. "This was my room," he said quietly, straightening. "And Matteo's, when we were boys." The admission caught me off guard. Alessandro rarely spoke of his childhood, and never with nostalgia. Yet here was tangible evidence of it. A preserved piece of his past I'd never known existed. "You grew up here?" I asked, trying to imagine a young Alessandro running through these grand halls. "Until I was 12, then boarding school in Switzerland." He shrugged slightly. "But we returned for holidays, summers. It was home, in its way." I moved to tuck the blankets around the twins, an automatic maternal gesture. "They'll be confused when they wake up in a strange place." "I've arranged for a familiar face," Alessandro said. "Mrs. Patel is being brought here as we speak." I stared at him. "Mrs. Patel? My neighbor? You've kidnapped my neighbor?" "Hardly kidnapped," he corrected, unfazed by my accusation. "She's being handsomely compensated to assist with the transition. The children trust her, and you trust her. Her presence will ease the adjustment." I wanted to be angry at his high-handedness, at the way he'd simply arranged everything without consultation. But the thoughtfulness of the gesture, providing my children with a familiar face during this upheaval, deflated my outrage. "Thank you," I said instead. "That was considerate." Something like triumph flickered in his eyes, quickly masked. "Your room is through here," he said, moving to a door at the side of the children's room. "It connects to theirs and to mine." The implications of the arrangement weren't lost on me. I'd be sandwiched between my children and Alessandro, with no exit that didn't pass through one of their rooms. Trapped, but in the most gilded of cages. My room, when I entered it, was equally thoughtful in its preparation, spacious but not overwhelming, decorated in the muted blues and greens I'd always favored. A large bed dominated one wall, looking so inviting after the night's ordeal that I had to physically resist the urge to collapse onto it. "Everything you need should be here," Alessandro said, following me in. "Clothes, toiletries. If anything is missing, tell Maria. She manages the household staff." "You seem to have thought of everything," I observed, running my fingers over the soft bedspread. "I've had 5 years to plan for your return," he replied simply. "Though I'll admit, The circumstances are not what I envisioned. Our eyes met across the room, the weight of all that remained unsaid hanging between us. He looked as exhausted as I felt, though he wore it differently, the weariness showing only in the slight tightness around his eyes, the barely perceptible slump of his shoulders. "You should rest," he said after a moment. "We both should. The security perimeter is established, and the children will sleep for hours yet. We'll talk when we're all more clear-headed." I nodded, suddenly too tired to maintain the tension between us. "What about Mrs. Patel? When will she arrive?" "By noon. Marco is personally overseeing her transport." He moved toward the door connecting my room to his. "If you need anything at all, I'm right through here." Then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him, leaving me alone in this beautiful, alien room. I barely managed to kick off my shoes before crawling onto the bed, still fully clothed. Sleep claimed me instantly, pulling me under like a stone dropping through water. I dreamed of running, of carrying the twins through endless dark corridors while gunshots echoed behind us. In the dream, Alessandro was both pursuer and protector, his presence simultaneously threatening and reassuring. I woke with a gasp, disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings until memory flooded back. The room was filled with midday light now, filtering through sheer curtains that stirred in a gentle breeze from the partially open window. Someone had covered me with a light blanket while I slept. The thought of Alessandro, or worse, a stranger, entering while I was unconscious, sent an uncomfortable shiver through me. I sat up, noting that someone had also placed a tray on the bedside table, a carafe of water, a cup of what smelled like freshly brewed coffee, and a small plate of pastries. My stomach growled in response, reminding me that it had been nearly a day since I'd eaten. As I reached for the coffee, I heard voices from the twins' room, their high, excited chatter punctuated by a deeper, masculine rumble that could only be Alessandro. I froze, coffee cup halfway to my lips, suddenly acutely aware that while I'd been sleeping, my children had woken in a strange place with their father, a man who was still essentially a stranger to them. I set the cup down and moved quickly to the connecting door, opening it to find a scene I couldn't have imagined 24 hours ago. Lucas and Emma, fully dressed in clothes I didn't recognize, sitting cross-legged on the floor with Alessandro, who was helping them construct an elaborate castle from wooden blocks. "The tower needs a flag," Lucas was saying authoritatively. "All castles have flags." "You're absolutely right," Alessandro agreed, his usual commanding tone softened to match Lucas's earnestness. "What color should it be?" "Purple," Emma declared. "With stars." "Blue," Lucas countered. "With a dragon." Alessandro appeared to consider this diplomatic crisis with appropriate gravity. "Perhaps we need 2 flags," he suggested, "one for each tower." This compromise seemed to satisfy both twins, who nodded in solemn agreement. It was then that Emma noticed me standing in the doorway. "Mommy!" she exclaimed, jumping up and running to me. "Look at our new room. It's so big. And Mr. Alessandro says there's a garden with butterflies and horses and a kitchen where we can make cookies whenever we want." I knelt to hug her, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, now mingled with what smelled like expensive children's shampoo. "That sounds wonderful, baby. Did you sleep well in your new bed?" "It's so soft," she confirmed, "like sleeping on a cloud." Lucas remained by the castle, but his eyes were bright with excitement. "Mr. Alessandro says this was his room when he was little, and all the toys were his, and now they're ours." "Is that right?" I looked at Alessandro, who had risen to his feet with fluid grace. He was dressed more casually than I'd ever seen him, dark jeans and a simple gray sweater that somehow managed to look as elegant on him as his custom suits. "I thought they might appreciate the connection," he said, his tone neutral, but his eyes searching mine. "Mrs. Patel arrived an hour ago. She helped get them bathed and dressed while you slept. She's resting now. The journey was tiring for her." "You should have woken me," I said, discomfort prickling at the thought of Alessandro managing my children's morning routine without me. "You needed the rest," he replied simply. "And we managed well enough, didn't we?" The last was directed at the twins, who nodded enthusiastically. "Mr. Alessandro made pancakes," Lucas informed me. "With his own hands. In the big kitchen. I raised an eyebrow at Alessandro. You cook now? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I have many talents you've yet to discover. The comment held an undercurrent that made heat rise to my cheeks. I looked away, focusing instead on the elaborate block construction. That's quite a castle. It's not finished, Lucas said importantly. We need the flags, and a moat with crocodiles. Perhaps you could help with that while I speak with your mother, Alessandro suggested smoothly. Maria has some blue fabric in the sewing room that would make an excellent moat. Lucas looked uncertain. But who will help us? You know where everything is. Maria will help you, Alessandro assured him. She raised me, after all. She knows all the best hiding places for treasure. He moved to the door and spoke briefly to someone outside, presumably issuing instructions to this Maria person. Moments later, an older woman with silver-streaked dark hair and kind eyes appeared. The twins regarded her warily until she smiled, revealing dimples in her weathered cheeks. So these are the little ones, she said in accented English. Come, let me show you where we keep the special blue cloth for moats. And perhaps we will find some chocolate in the kitchen, yes, if your mother permits it. She looked to me for confirmation. I nodded, not wanting to undermine her authority in front of the children. Just a small piece. They already had pancakes, apparently. Maria's eyes crinkled with amusement as she glanced at Alessandro. The young master? Cooking? Some things do change. She extended her hands to the twins. Come now, little ones. Let your parents talk. The word parents, so casually spoken, yet so loaded with meaning, hung in the air as the twins followed Maria from the room. As soon as they were out of earshot, I turned to Alessandro. They seem remarkably adjusted, I said cautiously. Children are resilient, he replied. And I've made sure they have no reason to be afraid. The shooting, I began, lowering my voice, though the twins were well out of earshot now. They must have questions. They believe it was fireworks, he said. An explanation they accepted readily enough. Children tend to believe what makes them feel safe. There was something in his tone, a subtle wistfulness, that caught my attention. I studied him more carefully, noting the signs of fatigue beneath his composed exterior. Did you sleep at all? I asked. Enough. He gestured toward the sitting area near the window. We should talk while the children are occupied. There are decisions to be made. I followed him to the pair of comfortable armchairs positioned to overlook the gardens below. Only now did I fully appreciate the setting. The mansion was perched on a hilltop, surrounded by landscaped grounds that gave way to forest, then mountains beyond. The isolation was both beautiful and strategic, I realized. No one could approach without being seen. Any news about who was watching the apartment? Who shot at us? I asked as we sat. Alessandro's expression hardened. We're still gathering information. The car was abandoned 2 miles from your apartment. Stolen, of course. Professional job. Professional, I repeated, a chill running through me despite the room's warmth. You mean hit men, most likely? He confirmed, his tone matter of fact. The question is who sent them and how they knew where to find you. Do you have theories? His eyes met mine, dark and unreadable. Several. None pleasant. I wrapped my arms around myself, the reality of our situation settling like a weight on my chest. The children could have been killed, but they weren't, Alessandro said firmly. And they won't be. No one will touch them while I draw breath. The fierce declaration should have been comforting. Instead, it only emphasized the danger we were now in. Danger my children had never faced before I'd let Alessandro back into our lives. This is why I left, I said, voice low but intense. This exact scenario, men with guns, threats, fear. You left because you were pregnant and afraid, he countered, and in your fear, you made a choice that put you and our children at greater risk. Alone, unprotected, vulnerable. We were fine for 5 years, I shot back. No one was shooting at us before you found us. Alessandro leaned forward, his gaze intense. Were you really fine, Eleanor? Working 2 jobs? Barely making ends meet? Living in an apartment where the heat doesn't work properly? Constantly looking over your shoulder? That's not fine. That's surviving. His words struck a nerve, exposing the precariousness of the life I'd built. But I wasn't ready to concede. At least we were safe. Were you? He raised an eyebrow. Or were you just lucky? How long before someone connected you to me without my protection to shield you? I had no answer for that. The question had haunted me during those early years on the run, though I'd eventually convinced myself we were truly free of his world. What happens now? I asked instead, shifting the conversation. We can't stay here indefinitely. Why not? Alessandro countered. This property is secure, isolated, and comfortable. The twins already seem to like it here. Their lives are back in Vermont, I protested. Their preschool, their few friends, all easily replaced, he cut in. Better schools, more suitable friends, a life worthy of who they are. And who are they, Alessandro? I challenged. Who do you think they are? My children, he said simply. Heirs to everything I've built, to my name, my legacy. Your criminal empire, you mean, I said bluntly. His expression didn't change, but I saw something flash behind his eyes. My business interests are diverse and largely legitimate, as you well know. The other aspects are necessary protections in a world that doesn't operate by conventional rules. Don't romanticize it, I said. You're the head of a crime family. You have blood on your hands. As do most powerful men, he returned evenly. The difference is, I don't pretend otherwise. I don't hide behind lawyers and corporations while exploiting the weak. I protect what's mine, directly and without apology. It was an old argument between us, one that had never been resolved. In the early days of our relationship, I'd been naive enough to believe I could separate the man from his business. Later, as I'd learned more, I'd told myself that his criminal activities were a product of his upbringing, that the legitimate businesses he was building would eventually replace the darker aspects of his empire. But Matteo's death had changed everything, unleashing a side of Alessandro that terrified me, cold, calculating, ruthless in his pursuit of vengeance. The man who could order executions over breakfast, then kiss me tenderly an hour later. The duality had eventually become too much to bear, especially when I discovered I was carrying his children. I don't want Lucas and Emma raised in your world, I said finally. I don't want them to think violence is an acceptable solution to problems. I don't want them surrounded by men with guns and taught to look over their shoulders. I want them to be children, Alessandro. Just children. They will be, he assured me, his voice softening. But they will also be safe, privileged, educated, prepared for the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. And if I disagree? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Then we will continue this discussion until we reach an arrangement that satisfies us both, he said diplomatically. But the children remain with me. That is non-negotiable. The calm certainty in his voice made it clear this wasn't a threat. It was simply a statement of fact, as immutable as gravity. Alessandro had found his children, and he would never let them go again. You'd take them from me? I asked, needing to hear him say it explicitly. He met my gaze steadily. I would prefer not to separate them from their mother. They need you, as any child needs their mother. But if you force my hand... He left the sentence unfinished, the implication clear. So I'm trapped, I concluded, a bitter taste in my mouth. Stay and accept your terms, or leave without my children. You make it sound like imprisonment, Alessandro said, a hint of frustration breaking through his controlled facade. When what I'm offering is security, comfort, a family united. The twins need their father, Eleanor, just as they need their mother. Together we can give them everything. Except normalcy, I countered. Except freedom from your world. Normalcy is a luxury few can afford, he replied. And as for freedom, there is no true freedom in this world. Only choices between different forms of constraint. Poverty constrains. Ignorance constrains. Weakness constrains. I would rather my children face the constraints of privilege and power than those of vulnerability and want. Before I could respond, a knock at the door interrupted us. Marco entered, his expression grim. Apologies for the intrusion, he said, addressing Alessandro. But we've identified the men who were watching the apartment. Alessandro straightened, instantly alert. And? Volkov's crew, Marco said simply. The name meant nothing to me, but Alessandro's reaction was immediate. A stillness that seemed to drop over him like a veil, his eyes going cold and distant. You're certain? he asked, voice deceptively calm. Marco nodded. The surveillance photos are conclusive. 2 of Mikhail's top enforcers. Alessandro was silent for a long moment, calculation visible behind his eyes. Double the security perimeter, he finally said. Full lockdown protocols. No one enters or leaves without direct authorization from me. Already done, Marco assured him. The property is secure. And the other matter? Alessandro asked cryptically. In progress, Marco replied. We should have confirmation by evening. Alessandro nodded once, dismissing him with a slight gesture. As soon as Marco left, I leaned forward. Who is Volkov? I asked. And why would he be watching me? Mikhail Volkov, Alessandro said, the name falling from his lips like a curse. Russian mafia. Controls most of the heroin trade on the East Coast. We've had territorial disputes in the past. And he sent men to kill us? Why? I pressed, fear bubbling up again at the thought of this unknown enemy. Not to kill you, Alessandro corrected. To watch, to gather intelligence. The shooting was likely opportunistic. They saw me arrive and recognized the chance to eliminate a rival. So this is about you, I said, the accusation clear. The danger to me, to the children, it's because of you. It's because of who I am, he agreed without apology. And now, because of who they are. My blood. My heirs. Even if I disappeared tomorrow, that fact would remain unchanged. The terrible logic of it struck me like a physical blow. Alessandro was right. The moment the twins were born, they became potential targets, whether I stayed with him or ran. The only difference was that with him, they had his protection. Without him, they were vulnerable. What does this Volkov want? I asked, struggling to understand the forces now arrayed against us. Territory. Power. Alessandro shrugged slightly. The usual motivations. We've maintained an uneasy peace for the past year. But if he's making moves against me personally, that suggests he's planning something larger. And we're caught in the middle, I concluded bleakly. No. Alessandro's voice hardened. You're not in the middle of anything. You're under my protection, which makes you untouchable. Volkov knows this. Or he should. If he's forgotten, I'll remind him. The implied violence in those simple words sent a shiver through me. This was the Alessandro I'd fled from, the man whose power came from fear, whose authority was built on the certainty that crossing him meant destruction. I don't want the twins exposed to violence, I said, returning to my core concern, to revenge and blood feuds and all the rest of it. They won't be, Alessandro assured me. Do you think I discuss business at the dinner table? That I conduct executions in the family wing? A hint of genuine offense colored his tone. I've always kept these worlds separate, Eleanor. You know that. It was true in its way. Even during our time together, Alessandro had been careful to shield me from the darker aspects of his business. Meetings were held away from our home. Phone calls were taken in private. The men who guarded us were unfailingly polite, their weapons discreetly concealed, but the illusion of separation had shattered the night they'd brought Matteo's body home, his handsome face untouched, the rest of him broken beyond recognition. The night Alessandro had held me and made promises of vengeance that chilled my blood. The night I'd realized that no matter how high the walls between his worlds, violence would always seep through the cracks. The twins deserve better than this life, I said softly. Alessandro's expression softened unexpectedly. On that, we agree completely. He leaned forward, taking my hands in his before I could pull away. Which is why I've been working to ensure they have it. What do you mean? For the past 3 years, I've been systematically legitimizing my businesses, he said, moving capital into legal ventures, distancing myself from the street-level operations, building a legacy that can stand in the light, not just in the shadows. I stared at him, searching his face for signs of deception and finding none. Why? You never cared about legitimacy before. Because of Matteo, he said simply. Because his death showed me that our father's path leads only to more bloodshed, more loss. I want something different for the next generation of Venucci's. The admission was so unexpected, so at odds with the Alessandro I'd fled from, that for a moment I couldn't respond. You don't believe me, he observed, reading my expression. I want to, I said honestly. But the Alessandro I knew was committed to the family business, to expansion, to power, to following in your father's footsteps. The Alessandro you knew lost his brother, he replied quietly, and then lost the woman he loved and the children he never knew he had. Those losses change a man's priorities. Our eyes met, and for the first time since our reunion, I saw vulnerability beneath his controlled exterior, a glimpse of the man I'd fallen in love with years ago, before grief and rage had hardened him. I need time, I said finally, to think, to adjust. Everything is happening so fast. Alessandro nodded, releasing my hands. Time you shall have. But remember, Eleanor, while we deliberate, forces are moving against us. Volkov won't wait for us to resolve our domestic arrangements. What will you do about him? I asked, already dreading the answer. What I must, he replied simply, to protect what's mine. The next days passed in a surreal blur of domesticity and danger. While Alessandro disappeared for hours into his study, conducting business, making calls, receiving reports from Marco and other men whose names I never learned, I slowly began to adapt to our new reality. The twins, with the resilience of children, embraced the change wholeheartedly. The mansion became their playground, its vast rooms and corridors filled with their laughter as they discovered new treasures daily. Maria doted on them shamelessly, slipping them sweets when she thought I wasn't looking, teaching Emma Italian lullabies, and showing Lucas how to play chess on an antique set that had belonged to Alessandro's grandfather. Mrs. Patel stayed for 3 days before requesting to return home, her presence having eased the twins' initial transition. Alessandro arranged for her departure with the same meticulous attention to detail that characterized everything he did. A generous compensation package, a security escort, and a promise of ongoing protection for her and her family. You're good with them, I observed one evening, finding Alessandro in the twins' room after their bath time, reading them a story from his own childhood. An Italian folktale about a clever fox that he translated effortlessly as he went. He glanced up, a rare, unguarded smile softening his features. They make it easy, he said simply. They're extraordinary children, Eleanor. You've done well. The compliment, so unexpected and sincere, caught me off guard. Thank you, I managed, though I think they came that way. Extraordinary from the start. Alessandro's hand moved to stroke Emma's damp curls as she nestled against his side, already half asleep. Perhaps. But nurture matters as much as nature. You gave them security, stability, love, despite the circumstances. We lapsed into silence as he finished the story, his deep voice gentle in a way few people ever heard. When both twins were finally asleep, we retreated to the sitting room that connected our bedrooms, neutral territory where we'd begun to have our nightly conversations. Any news? I asked, taking my usual chair by the window. The question had become a ritual, my way of asking about Volkov, without specifics that might lead to answers I wasn't prepared to hear. Alessandro poured himself a small measure of scotch from the decanter on the side table. Nothing concrete, he replied. But my sources indicate movement in his organization, preparations of some kind. I nodded, accepting this vague update as I had the others. In truth, I didn't want details. I didn't want to know what preparations might mean, or what Alessandro's countermeasures entailed. Plausible deniability, I told myself. A moral buffer between me and the violence that always lurked at the edges of his world. I spoke with Dr. Montgomery today, Alessandro said, changing the subject. She'll be here tomorrow to meet the twins. Her credentials are impeccable. Degrees from Harvard and Oxford, specializing in early childhood development. A doctor? I frowned. The twins aren't sick. Not that kind of doctor, he clarified. A child psychologist, to assess how they're adjusting to the changes, to help us navigate this transition in a way that minimizes any negative impact. The thoughtfulness of the gesture was so unexpected that for a moment I could only stare at him. You arranged for a child psychologist? Of course, he said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Their well-being is my primary concern. I may be new to fatherhood, but I'm not new to responsibility, Eleanor, I know that, I admitted. I just didn't expect this level of consideration. Something flickered in his eyes, hurt, perhaps, at my low expectations. I told you before, I want something different for them than what I had, than what I've been. I looked away, unable to hold his gaze. The Alessandro sitting across from me was increasingly difficult to reconcile with the man I'd fled from 5 years ago. This Alessandro arranged for child psychologists, read bedtime stories, made pancakes, and spoke of leaving behind the criminal world that had defined his family for generations. I've been thinking, I said carefully, about what happens next, about our arrangement. He set down his glass, giving me his full attention. And I'm willing to stay, I said, the decision I'd been wrestling with for days finally crystallizing into words, for the twins, for their safety. But I have conditions. If Alessandro was surprised by my capitulation, he didn't show it. He simply nodded, waiting for me to continue. First, I want them to have as normal a childhood as possible. School with other children, not just tutors. Friends, activities outside this estate. With appropriate security measures, he qualified. Discreet ones, I countered. I won't have them growing up surrounded by visible bodyguards, made to feel different or afraid. Agreed, he said after a moment's consideration. What else? I want legal guarantees, I continued, forcing myself to maintain eye contact. Joint custody, formally documented. If anything happens to you, nothing will happen to me, he interjected, a hint of his old arrogance surfacing. If it does, I pressed, I need to know the twins won't be drawn into succession battles or power struggles within your organization, that they'll remain with me, protected but separate from that world. Alessandro was silent for a long moment, considering this. I'll have papers drawn up, he finally said. My lawyer will work with whoever you choose to represent your interests. Everything will be legally binding and witnessed. Relief washed through me. I'd expected more resistance to this condition. Is there more? He asked, his dark eyes unreadable in the room's dim light. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the most difficult condition. I want a life of my own, I said. Not just as the twins' mother or whatever I am to you. I want to finish my degree, to work eventually when they're older, to have some independence. You wish to leave the estate? His voice was carefully neutral. No, I clarified. At least not while the threat from Volkov remains. But I won't be a prisoner here, no matter how gilded the cage. I need purpose beyond motherhood, Alessandro. The nursing degree, he said, surprising me with his recall of a dream I'd mentioned years ago. You wanted to become a nurse before we met, I finished for him. Yes, I was halfway through the program when I had to drop out. Alessandro nodded slowly. Online courses at first, perhaps. Then, when security concerns allow, in-person classes at a nearby university. With protection, of course. Of course, I echoed, again surprised by his ready acceptance. Is that all? He asked. I hesitated, then decided to lay all my cards on the table. One more thing. About us. About our relationship. Something shifted in his posture. A subtle tensing that betrayed his interest despite his composed expression. Go on. I won't pretend, I said firmly. I won't act like we're a happy family reconciled, at least not when it's just us. The twins need stability, so I won't undermine you in front of them or create conflict they can sense. But in private, I need honesty between us. I need time, Alessandro. Time to know the man you are now, not just the man I left. And if that man is someone you could care for again? He asked, his voice dropping lower. Someone you could forgive? The question hung between us, charged with all the complicated history and unresolved feelings we'd been carefully navigating around. I don't know, I answered honestly. 5 years is a long time. We've both changed. Some things don't change, Eleanor. He set his glass down and stood, moving to the window beside my chair. Outside, moonlight silvered the landscape, casting long shadows across the manicured gardens. Some things are as constant as the stars. I knew he was speaking of his feelings for me, feelings I'd once returned with equal intensity. But love hadn't been our problem. It was everything that came with it. The danger, the moral compromises, the fear that had ultimately driven me away. Time, I repeated, not trusting myself to say more with him standing so close, his familiar scent stirring memories I'd fought to suppress for years. Time you shall have, he agreed quietly, though I warn you, my patience has limits, especially when I know what we once had, what we could have again. Before I could respond, a soft knock interrupted us. Marco stood in the doorway, his expression grim enough to immediately dispel the intimacy of the moment. "Forgive the intrusion," he said, addressing Alessandro. "But we've received information that requires immediate attention." Alessandro's demeanor shifted instantly, the private man vanishing behind the mask of the businessman, or the crime lord. "Volkov?" Marco nodded once. "We've confirmed his intentions. The timetable has accelerated." A muscle ticked in Alessandro's jaw, the only outward sign of his reaction. "Very well. Convene the lieutenants in my study. 10 minutes. Marco departed with a slight bow, leaving us alone again in a room that suddenly felt colder. "What's happening?" I asked, wrapping my arms around myself. "Nothing you need concern yourself with," Alessandro replied, his voice distant in a way it hadn't been moments before. "Don't do that," I said, sharper than I'd intended. "Don't shut me out when it concerns the safety of my children." He looked at me for a long moment, then inclined his head slightly, acknowledging the rebuke. "We've received confirmation that Volkov is planning a coordinated move against several of my business interests, simultaneously targeting multiple locations to stretch our defenses." "An attack?" I asked, my mouth suddenly dry. "Here?" "No," he assured me. "The estate isn't on their radar. This is about territory, business assets, but the scale suggests a larger objective than simple expansion." "What do you think he wants?" Alessandro's eyes met mine, dark and unflinching. "To eliminate a rival, permanently." The implication was clear. Volkov wasn't just after Alessandro's business. He was after Alessandro himself, and by extension, anyone connected to him. "The twins," I whispered, fear clawing at my throat, "are safer here than anywhere on Earth," Alessandro completed firmly. "The estate's security is impenetrable. No one approaches without being detected miles away." "But you'll be leaving," I guessed, reading between the lines of Marco's summons. "To deal with this threat, briefly," he confirmed. 2 days, perhaps 3. I need to be seen, to coordinate our response personally, to send a message. I didn't ask what kind of message. I didn't want to know. "When?" I asked instead. "Tomorrow morning, early." I nodded, absorbing this. Just as we'd begun to establish some fragile equilibrium, he would be gone, leaving me alone in this massive house, surrounded by his men but without his presence. "The twins will be disappointed," I said, thinking of how quickly they'd bonded with him, how Lucas now sought his approval for every small achievement, how Emma saved the purple jelly beans for him because she'd learned they were his favorite. "I'll explain before I go," Alessandro said, "and I'll call them every evening. It's a necessary absence, Eleanor. Surely you understand that." I did understand. That was the problem. Despite my moral objections to his world, I understood its brutal logic, that showing weakness invited attack, that threats had to be met with overwhelming force, that protection sometimes required preemptive strikes. "Be careful," I said finally, the words escaping before I could reconsider them. Something softened in his expression. "I always am," he replied. Then, after a slight hesitation, "Will you wait up for me? After I finish with this meeting?" The request surprised me, vulnerable in a way Alessandro rarely allowed himself to be. "Why?" "Because I'd like to spend more time with you," he said simply. "Before I have to leave, because the thought of your company makes the burden of what I must do more bearable." I should have refused, should have maintained the careful distance I'd been trying to preserve since our reunion. Instead, I heard myself say, "I'll wait." He nodded once, a smile touching his lips briefly before he turned and left, his posture already shifting into the authoritative stance required for the meeting ahead. I remained by the window, watching the night deepen over the estate grounds, thinking of the strange turn my life had taken. A week ago, I'd been a struggling single mother in a small Vermont town, Now I was ensconced in a mansion, negotiating custody arrangements with a crime lord, waiting up for him like a wife expecting her husband home from a late meeting. The comparison brought a bitter laugh to my lips. Some things never changed. Alessandro still moved between worlds with practiced ease, still expected me to accept the duality of his nature. And I, despite all my protests and principles, still found myself drawn to him, still responding to his gravity like a planet unable to escape its orbit. Hours passed. I dozed intermittently in the comfortable chair, waking at small sounds, the distant murmur of voices from Alessandro's study, the occasional footsteps of security men patrolling the corridors, the wind stirring tree branches against the windows. It was past midnight when he returned. Looking weary in a way few people ever witnessed, he paused in the doorway, taking in my curled form in the chair. "You stayed," he observed, voice low. "I said I would," I replied, straightening. He crossed to the sideboard and poured himself another measure of scotch, the amber liquid catching the light as he swirled it in the crystal glass. "It will be handled," he said after a long moment. "Volkov's ambitions will be checked." I didn't ask how. Another boundary I maintained, not knowing the specifics of his methods, the details of how threats were handled in his world. "You're leaving at dawn?" I asked instead. He nodded, taking a seat in the chair opposite mine. "Marco will remain here to oversee security. Maria will help with the children. Dr. Montgomery's appointment has been rescheduled for after my return." "We'll manage," I assured him, though the prospect of his absence left me with an uneasiness I hadn't expected to feel. "I know you will," he said. "You've been managing alone for 5 years." The simple acknowledgement of what I'd done, raising his children without him, building a life from nothing, surviving against the odds, felt like a validation I hadn't realized I'd been seeking. It wasn't easy, I admitted. There were nights I wondered if I'd made the right choice, if the twins wouldn't have been better off with the security you could provide. "And now?" he asked, watching me intently. "Do you still wonder?" I considered the question seriously. I think there was no perfect choice, only impossible ones. I did what I thought was right at the time, with the information I had. "As did I, in searching for you," he returned, though perhaps with less noble intentions. "I wanted you back, Eleanor. I won't pretend my motives were purely paternal concern for children I didn't know existed." The honesty was refreshing, if uncomfortable. "Why did you want me back?" I asked, the question escaping before I could reconsider. "After what I did, disappearing without a word, most men would have written me off as not worth the trouble." A smile touched his lips, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I think we both know I'm not most men." He set his glass down, leaning forward slightly. "I wanted you back because in 5 years, no one has come close to making me feel what you did. Because the hole you left was never filled, not by work or power or other women. Because despite everything, you were the only one who saw me, not just the businessman or the heir to my father's empire, but me." The raw honesty of the admission caught me off guard. Alessandro had never been one for emotional declarations. His feelings had always been expressed more through action than words. "I saw all of you," I said quietly. "That was the problem. I saw the man I loved, but I also saw the man who could order deaths over breakfast, the man who built an empire on threats and fear. And now?" he asked, his dark eyes searching mine. "What do you see now?" I studied him in the dim light, the face I'd once known better than my own, now subtly changed by time and experience. The silver at his temples, the new lines etching his forehead, the weariness behind his eyes that he tried to conceal. "I see a man trying to change," I said finally. "I'm just not sure if it's too late. If some paths, once taken, can ever truly be left behind." He was silent for a long moment. "For myself, perhaps it is too late," he admitted. "Too much blood under the bridge, too many enemies, too many promises and threats that must be honored. But for the twins, for their future, it's not too late. That's what matters now." "And for us?" The question slipped out unbidden. "Is it too late for whatever we might have been?" Alessandro's gaze sharpened, a flicker of the old intensity returning. "That depends entirely on you." he said. My feelings haven't changed, Eleanor. They've only deepened with time and separation. With the knowledge of what you've given me, our children. I looked away, unable to maintain eye contact under the weight of his regard. I need time, I repeated. To know who you are now, who I am now. Then time you shall have, he said again. But know this, I intend to win you back, not by force or manipulation, but by showing you the man I'm trying to become. The father I want to be for our children, the partner I could be for you, if given the chance. The declaration hung between us, both promise and challenge. Part of me, the practical, cautious part that had kept the twins safe for 5 years, warned against believing him, against trusting that a man so deeply embedded in a world of violence could truly change. But another part, the part that remembered how it felt to be loved by him, to be the center of his formidable focus, whispered that perhaps, for his children, he might achieve the impossible. I should get some sleep, I said finally, rising from my chair. And so should you, if you're leaving at dawn. Alessandro stood as well, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Eleanor, he said softly, reaching out to brush a strand of hair from my face. The simple contact sent electricity coursing through me, a visceral reminder of what had always been between us. Thank you for staying, for giving me this chance with the twins. With you. I haven't given you anything yet, I reminded him, stepping back slightly. Just time. Possibility. Sometimes possibility is enough, he replied. Good night, Eleanor. I'll see you before I leave in the morning. I nodded, retreating to my room before I could do something foolish. Like lean into his touch, like tell him I'd missed him too, like admit that in my darkest moments over the past 5 years, I'd sometimes wished for his strength beside me. Sleep came fitfully that night, my dreams a confused jumble of past and present. Alessandro as I'd first known him. Alessandro reading to our children. Alessandro surrounded by men with guns. Alessandro lying in a pool of blood while Volkov stood over him. I woke before dawn, heart racing, the last image still vivid behind my eyelids. I slipped from my bed and moved to check on the twins, finding them sleeping peacefully, untroubled by the adult concerns that kept me awake. Lucas had kicked off his blankets as usual. I tucked them back around him, brushing a kiss against his forehead. Emma clutched her elephant. Dark lashes fanned against her cheeks in slumber. A sound at the door made me turn. Alessandro stood watching us, already dressed for travel in a tailored suit that emphasized his broad shoulders. He'd always been handsome, but something about seeing him there, in the doorway of our children's room, struck me with particular force. I was coming to say goodbye, he said softly, entering the room to stand beside me. I didn't expect you to be awake yet. Bad dreams, I admitted. Couldn't sleep. He nodded, understanding without needing elaboration. I won't wake them, he decided, looking at the peaceful faces of our children. Better they remember me from last night's bedtime stories than a hurried goodbye. I'll tell them you had important business, I promised, that you'll call tonight. Thank you. His gaze moved from the twins to me, taking in my sleep-rumpled appearance with a softness I remembered from our past. Take care of them. And yourself. I will. I hesitated, then added, Come back safely, Alessandro. They need you now. They've just found you. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, at my implicit acknowledgement that his presence in their lives mattered. I'll return as soon as it's done, he promised. 3 days at most. He reached out, his hand cupping my cheek briefly before he leaned in to press a kiss to my forehead. Chaste but lingering, filled with unspoken meaning. Then he was gone, moving silently from the room with the predator's grace that had always been uniquely his. I remained with the twins until the sound of vehicles in the driveway drew me to the window. Alessandro emerged from the house below, flanked by Marco and several other men, their postures alert and professional. He paused for a moment, looking up at the house, at our window, though he couldn't have seen me behind the curtains, before sliding into the waiting car. As the convoy pulled away, disappearing down the winding driveway toward the main road, I felt a curious mixture of relief and apprehension. For the first time since our reunion, I was free of Alessandro's immediate presence, free to think clearly, without the magnetic pull he'd always exerted on me. Yet I found myself already counting the hours until his return, already rehearsing how I would explain his absence to the twins when they woke. Already wondering if the man who returned would be the Alessandro who read bedtime stories and arranged for child psychologists, or the Alessandro who handled rivals and enemies with the ruthless efficiency that had built his empire. The days without him passed both quickly and slowly. The twins asked for him constantly at first, mollified somewhat by his nightly phone calls, which became the anchor of their evening routine. During these calls, I would listen from a distance as he asked about their days, told them stories, promised gifts upon his return. Always at the end, he would ask to speak with me privately. Brief conversations that were carefully neutral on both sides, status updates rather than personal exchanges. On the third day, as promised, the security team received word of his impending return. The twins were ecstatic, rushing around the house to create welcome home drawings under Maria's indulgent supervision. I found myself checking my appearance in mirrors, changing outfits twice before settling on a simple blue dress I'd found in the closet. Coincidentally, or perhaps not, the exact shade Alessandro had once said brought out my eyes. Evening fell with no sign of him. The twins grew restless, then disappointed, finally falling asleep clutching the drawings they'd made. I tucked them in with promises that he would be there when they woke, hoping I wasn't lying. It was past midnight when I heard cars on the driveway, the low murmur of voices in the entrance hall below. I'd been waiting in the sitting room, pretending to read a book while anxiety gnawed at me. Had something gone wrong? Was he injured? Arrested? Worse? Relief washed through me when I heard his familiar tread on the stairs, measured and confident. But when he appeared in the doorway, I knew immediately that something had changed. There was a coldness in his eyes I hadn't seen since our reunion, a distance that spoke of walls rebuilt. "You're back," I said, unnecessarily, setting aside my book. The twins waited up as long as they could. "I'll see them in the morning," he replied, his voice flat. There were complications. I studied him more carefully, noting now the subtle signs of strain, the tightness around his mouth, the barely perceptible darkening beneath one eye that suggested a bruise covered with makeup. "What happened?" I asked, rising from my chair. "Are you hurt?" "Nothing serious." He moved to the sideboard, pouring himself a measure of scotch with movements that betrayed a stiffness in his right shoulder. "Volkov has been dealt with. His organization is in disarray. The threat is neutralized." The clinical language couldn't disguise what must have occurred: violence, possibly death. I felt a familiar revulsion rise within me, followed immediately by guilt. Whatever Alessandro had done, he'd done to protect us, me and the twins. "At what cost?" I asked quietly. His eyes met mine, hard as obsidian. "The necessary one." I nodded, not pressing for details I didn't want to hear. "And you? What was the cost to you?" Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, that I was asking about him rather than his actions. "Nothing permanent," he said after a moment, his voice softening slightly. "Though I may need to postpone our horseback riding lesson with Lucas tomorrow. My shoulder needs a day or two." The casual reference to plans he'd made with our son, plans I hadn't known about, reminded me of how quickly he'd integrated himself into the twins' lives, how eagerly they'd accepted him. "They missed you," I said. "More than I expected, given how short a time they've known you." "Children recognize what belongs to them," Alessandro replied, taking a seat with a barely concealed wince. "Just as they recognize who belongs to them." I couldn't argue with the observation. The twins had claimed Alessandro with the uncomplicated possessiveness of children, accepting him as theirs without the reservations that plagued me. "Does it ever stop?" I asked suddenly. "The violence? The enemies? Or is this just the first of many Volkovs who will threaten our family?" Alessandro considered the question seriously, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "It can stop," he said finally. "It will stop, for the twins. I've already set certain things in motion, legitimate businesses that can sustain us, political connections that provide protection through legal channels, investments that will secure their future without the need for alternative revenue streams." "How long?" I pressed. "How long until they're truly safe? Until we're not looking over our shoulders?" 2 years, he said with surprising specificity. Perhaps 3. Time to fully extricate ourselves from certain obligations, to transfer power to trusted lieutenants, to establish the twins' future as separate from the family's past. He looked at me directly. I've already begun the process, accelerated it, since finding you and the children. What happened with Volkov only confirms the necessity of this transition. I wanted to believe him. Wanted to trust that the man before me, this complex blend of ruthless crime lord and devoted father, could achieve what generations of his family had not, escape from the cycle of violence and retribution that defined their world. And in the meantime, I asked, more nights like this? More enemies to be handled? Fewer, he promised. And none that will touch our family directly, if I can help it. He set down his glass, leaning forward despite what must have been considerable pain in his shoulder. Eleanor, I know what you want for them. What you've always wanted. A normal life. Safety. Innocence preserved as long as possible. I want that too. Do you? I challenged. Or do you want them to follow in your footsteps? To inherit not just your wealth, but your empire? No, he said with unexpected vehemence. Never that. I want them to have choices I never had. I want Lucas to become whatever he dreams of. Doctor, artist, businessman. I want Emma to have every opportunity, every door open to her. I want them free of the legacy that's defined my life since birth. The raw emotion in his voice, the uncharacteristic openness of the declaration, made my chest ache. This was the Alessandro I'd glimpsed occasionally during our time together. The man behind the mask. The one who carried dreams and wounds he rarely revealed to anyone. I believe you, I said softly. God help me. I believe you want that for them. Relief flashed across his features, quickly masked. Thank you, he said simply. We fell silent, the tension between us shifting into something more familiar, more intimate. Despite everything, the violence implied in his handling of Volkov, the years of separation, the moral gulf between us, I found myself responding to his presence as I always had, drawn to the complex man beneath the powerful exterior. You should rest, I said finally, breaking the charged silence. You're injured, and the twins will want all your attention tomorrow. I should, he agreed, though he made no move to leave. Instead, his dark eyes held mine. I missed you, Eleanor. These 3 days away, I found myself thinking of you as much as the children. The admission hung between us, both invitation and challenge. I could deflect, maintain the careful distance I'd established. Or I could acknowledge the truth, that despite my reservations, despite the complications of our situation, I'd missed him too. It was quieter without you, I admitted, choosing my words carefully. The house feels different when you're here. A smile touched his lips. That's not quite the same as saying you missed me. No, I agreed, it's not. Ever the careful one, he observed, without rancor. Keeping your cards close, even now. Old habits. I echoed his words from days before. He rose with careful movements, the slight stiffness the only indication of his injury. Good night, Eleanor. I'll see you in the morning. As he moved toward the door, something impulsive overtook me. A need to bridge the distance, to acknowledge what remained between us despite everything. Alessandro, I called softly. He paused, turning back with a questioning look. I did miss you, I admitted. More than I should have. His expression softened, a genuine smile replacing the controlled mask he typically wore. Then perhaps there's hope for us yet, he said quietly. After he'd gone, I remained in the sitting room, thinking of the strange path that had led us here. From lovers to strangers to reluctant co-parents, now moving toward something undefined but undeniably real. I thought of the twins, sleeping peacefully down the hall, unaware of the complicated emotions swirling between their parents. I thought of the future Alessandro had promised. Legitimate businesses, safety, choices for our children that neither of us had been granted. And for the first time since he'd reappeared in my life, I allowed myself to imagine a future where we were truly a family, where the wall I'd built between us gradually lowered, where the trust that had been shattered might someday be rebuilt. Not quickly, not easily, but possibly. Morning brought chaos and joy as the twins discovered Alessandro's return. They burst into his room without ceremony, a liberty I would never have taken, climbing onto his bed with excited chatter about all he'd missed. I found them there, Alessandro propped against his pillows with a twin on each side, listening with exaggerated interest to Lucas's detailed account of a caterpillar they'd found in the garden. "Mommy!" Emma called, spotting me in the doorway. "Daddy's home." The word, so casually spoken, yet so momentous, stopped me in my tracks. Daddy. When had that happened? Alessandro's eyes met mine over their heads, his expression a complex mixture of triumph, joy, and something like humility. "Yes," I said, finding my voice. "He is." In that moment, watching my children with their father, I knew that whatever path lay ahead, however complicated, however fraught with old wounds and new challenges, we would walk it together. Not for my sake, or for Alessandro's, but for these two small people who deserved all the love and protection both their parents could provide. The future I'd feared for so long, one where Alessandro Vannucci was part of our lives, had become a reality, but it wasn't the nightmare I'd imagined during those 5 years on the run. It was something else entirely. Complex, imperfect, sometimes frightening, but also filled with possibilities I'd never allowed myself to consider. As Alessandro met my gaze over our children's heads, I saw in his eyes the same realization, that the family we'd created, against all odds and despite our best efforts to the contrary, might just be worth fighting for, worth changing for. And for the first time in 5 years, I let myself believe in the possibility of happiness. Not the uncomplicated joy I'd once imagined, but a deeper, harder-won contentment, built on truth, on acceptance, on facing the darkness together, rather than fleeing from it alone. "Come here," Alessandro said softly, patting the bed beside him. "There's room for one more." After a moment's hesitation, I crossed the room and joined my family on the bed, completing the circle as Emma immediately climbed into my lap. Alessandro's arm, the uninjured one, extended along the pillows behind me, not quite touching but present, supportive. As the twins chattered and laughed, their joy filling the room like sunshine, I felt Alessandro's fingers tentatively brush against my shoulder. A question, not a demand. After a moment's consideration, I leaned back slightly, accepting the contact, the connection. His smile, when it came, was worth the risk. Not the calculated charm he showed the world, but something real and rare, the smile of a man who had fought and bled and sinned, but who had finally found his way home. And despite everything, I smiled back.